Hello everybody, this is Vera Nazarian and we are coming to you live or pre-recorded or semi-recorded, however this happens. And this is going to be a part of the convention, TAGCon 2023 Golden Disc of Ra. And this is one of our program items and it's called A Gift from Earth. Now, I need to explain this to you because it's not a story that I'm going to read. It's not a story that I wrote, but it's a story about me. It happened a long time ago. In fact, it happened somewhere around 1976. And this is a story of the first time that I read a science fiction novel in English. And it's an interesting story, because before that, many of you are aware of the fact that I am a native Russian speaker and an Armenian speaker because I'm originally an immigrant. I came from the USSR with my parents and we were refugees. We left the USSR somewhere around 1975 or so. I think it was early 1975, but we were gone for about a year in between different countries. We left to Lebanon. So I was in Beirut, Lebanon, and we stayed there for about a year. But what happened was, the minute we arrived in Lebanon as refugees, 2 weeks later, the Lebanese civil war started. So it was just really insane. We were basically facing what a lot of people around the world right now are facing in terms of there were military assaults, missiles flying. You were basically curfews, all kinds of ceasefires, restrictions. You couldn't get out because there were snipers everywhere. But we stayed in the stone house, and by the time we finally were approved to leave the country, because we were going with a bunch of other Armenians, there were Syrians, Armenians, other nationalities. We were bused together to airports to be taken out of the country because it was that bad. And the story was that I was an 8 to 9 year old. I think I was still 8, or maybe I was already 9. But as a refugee, I was 8, 9, and 10. 10 happened later. But let me get to the story. So we were being taken out of Lebanon, and as we were put on the planes, finally, long story short, we got on planes, and I think it was either in the airport, in the Lebanese airport going to Greece, or a little bit later. I think it was going to Greece because we were refugees to Greece afterwards. So after Lebanon, we were taken to Greece, where I was a refugee. Then we went to via Italy, we went to the United States. But so we were somewhere in the airport. And my English was really rudimentary because I was Russian native speaker. We picked up a little bit of Arabic in Lebanon. Lebanon being a former colony, and I think it was a former French colony. But so a lot of the street signs and things were in French, but there was also English speakers. And somewhere in an airport, my dad or my mom, somebody left a book lying on the seat in the airport, and this book was in English, and it had like a spaceship on the cover. It was really exciting, and I was like, at that point, I loved fantasy and science fiction, in Russian. This was like me as a kid, 8-year-old kid, and I could not really speak English more than whatever I picked up in Lebanon and from my rudimentary class back in Moscow, because I was starting to learn English in school. But it was bad. My English was ridiculous. So I could not have, for the life of me, read anything in English. But there was this book, you guys. This book, it's called A Gift from Earth, Larry Niven. And this is a really old book. Originally, it came out, I think it was it says here, the first edition, 1968 edition. This was reissued in 1975. So this must have been the 1975 printing. But So I picked up this book and I started to try to read because I was desperate. I loved it. We were on the plane and, you know, it had a spaceship on the cover. Look at this amazing spaceship. And I started to read. This is by A Gift from Earth by Larry Niven. Larry Niven. And I started to read and I couldn't understand anything. I mean, my mom was helping me. We had a Russian dictionary and I was forcing myself. I went to the first page and there was something on the very first page. I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm kind of filming this. On the very first page, there was a word called Mount Look at That. And you spell it by look, I-T-T-H-A-T. Like look at that, but it's like play on words, so look at that. But I would never have known this because I did not know enough English to know a play of words. So of course in my mind this was Mount Lukithat. Lukithat. That's what I thought it was the name. Anyway, so I struggled with this book. I fought, and I think I understood some of it, and then eventually the plane ride was over. Maybe I just put this back in the luggage in our poor little suitcase. And then finally, after Greece, we made it to the United States, and I think this was, we went from New York to Los Angeles, so this was in LA already. And at that point, I just turned 10 when we came, like a month later after we came to the United States, I turned 10. And this was the first book in English that was science fiction. Oh, believe me, I've read in Russian, other things, but this is the English. And later on, I think I finally read it as I picked up more English. You know, I went to 5th grade. I skipped 4th grade because that's when we were refugees between countries. So I never went to 4th grade. You know, war. You couldn't go to school or anything. But we went to 5th grade. I started to pick up English. I was really good. I started to scribble in English. I was a really early writer in English. But eventually, long story short, I became a writer. I got published at the age of 17. I was a high school student, actually, when I sold my first story to an anthology, a Doll Books anthology called Swords and Sorcerers, edited by Marion Zimmer Bradley. And that was my first story in there. But anyway, long story short, keep going. Years are passing by. I became a member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, which is now called, or SFWA. It's now called the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association. That was the latest name change. So that's the current name. But I got to hang out with other writers, and I met a lot of writers, and including Larry Niven. Larry Niven, the author of this book. So what did I do? I brought, knowing that he was going to be at that particular convention, it may have been a Worldcon, it may have been a LostCon, I don't know what it was, but I brought this book with me to the convention, and I brought it to the SFWA suite where Larry was sitting and I was sitting, you know, we were in, and I told him the story. I told him, Larry, thank you for writing this book. This was the first. He got such a kick out of it that he signed this book. He signed this book. This is the same book. And here's the signature. Let me show you. This is so cool. This is Larry Niven's signature. And it says, to Vera Nazarian, welcome to civilization, Larry Niven. I will never give up remembering, or, you know, I would never give up this book. I would treasure this book. This is my first. This is amazing. A Gift from Earth by Larry Niven. And there's Larry. How many years later? Probably 76, 80, 90. It was at least 25 to 30 years later is when this happened. So I've had this book for that long, and then I got the signature of Larry Niven. And this is my story of my first science fiction book in English. A Gift from Earth. And it was a good book. It really was. It was a good, hard science fiction with, you know, on another different planet with Mount Look at That, which only recently did, when I looked again at this book, and I saw Mount Look at That, and it went click. Mount Look at That. Look at that. I got it. I got the joke 30 years later because I learned English. So this is just my story to all of you, and I thought this was something that you guys would get a kick out of, right? This is my little journey, and it's been a long, long trip to be a writer, and so many things happened in the meantime. I learned English, I got better at it, I started to write, and then, yep, I put out my own books now. Thanks, Larry, for, I'm being a colleague now. It's amazing. So I hope you enjoyed my little tidbit here. And this has been a little story for you, for people who are attending TagCon 2023 Golden Disc of Ra. And this video will eventually be available on our YouTube channel. But for now, enjoy the convention, everybody. Bye-bye.